Alright, hey guys, welcome to another Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be learning how to do something really cool, and I'm going to show it to you right now. I think it's pretty cool. It may not have a large amount of purpose, as this individual example may show, but I think from the various techniques into doing this next really cool thing I'm about to show you, I think you can learn enough stuff about particle systems and textures and several other things that you may find that this is unlocks a whole new world in Blender for you. So I'm going to go ahead and play the animation and prepare to have your jaw drop. This is pretty cool. Okay, not as cool as I made it out to be probably, but it's still pretty cool. This is really awesome, I think, and it's actually very easy and simple to make this animation happen here. If I press Z, you're going to see something that may shock you a little bit. There's a lot of lines in this one cube here, and that is because this is a group cube of a bunch of different fracture objects. But these actual fracture objects are not what's coming off the cube. Well, they are kind of, but I'm going to explain that here in the setup, and then I'm going to actually take you step by step and recreate this exact cube, or something very close to it. So, one, we have our particle system here. We don't have to worry about this modifier. The main one that's doing the real magic here and making this cube slowly disappear as parts fly off of it is the explode modifier. The explode modifier is a really cool modifier because it allows us to take a object and remove and force off edges, faces, and vertices based on a particle system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn off this particle system. And now if we just want this animation again here, and you'll see it's going to be a little bit hard to see, but we'll update it like that. And I believe that this will see, you see there's a little bit of flashing here. And what we need to do is also select these. And now you should be able to see something of the sort, maybe not. I don't know, Blender may be acting up for me, I guess. But basically what's happening here is, yeah, you can see now here, if I pause the animation about here, you can see there's also a ton of little triangles and stuff here. And that's because all I want to have selected here in this animation plays is not the dead and not the alive, but the unborn. Because you see here, with our unborn, is all of these fractured objects that have yet to explode. And that's really how you have to use the explode modifier in this instance. There are other instances where you may use the explode modifier a bit differently, but I'll also show you how the particle system's set up now. So I just have a large number of particles just to have a lot of little fractures coming out of this thing. I have also in my scene, I turned gravity off just so that I could get this nice easy look. There is still a way to do this without gravity or with gravity on, but it's easier just to turn gravity off for this particular effect. So I went ahead and turned it off, and then I used a not random count, but it's taking from a group. And the group is the actual fractured object before I put it together. You can see each of these is its own individual part, and they are all in one giant group, which is being randomly selected from in no particular order. And then they are all size 1 and a random of 0.5. The random of 0.5 gets us lots of little shards, very small shards, so it looks like there's tons of little fractures happening within the big fractures, but it's also giving us some of the larger chunks as well, which is very helpful, and it makes a whole new level of realism with this whole exploding cube here. And, you know, this looks really cool, and I'm sure if you were to, you know, pause a simulation and then have an animation where it rotates around it, it does look really cool. I've done it a few times, and this is a cool effect I sometimes just like to mess around with when I'm not really doing anything in Blender. So this is just a really cool and fairly easy effect to do. So I'm going to go ahead and file renew, start anew, and just everything, delete everything, and you're going to add back in our cube. So now we have our default cube. I'm going to go into user preferences because this you may have to do. I've purposely turned this off so that I can show you this. If you are using any version of Blender past 2.65, I think, you will have, if you type in cell, object, cell, fracture here. Now there is another one called fracture tools, but we're not going to worry about that at the moment because we're not really working in the game engine or recording physics, so we don't really need to worry about those. So you see now we have our cube and nothing's really changed about it. So what we're going to do is we're first going to add a particle system to our cube with this, and I'm going to change the number to 500 here. The start is going to be 0 and the end is going to be 50. Now I've figured these values out before. They may not necessarily be values that you may need to use, and you may want to use different ones. And then we're also going to change the lifetime here random up to 0.5 so that It gives our thing a whole little randomness. You see here that they're randomly dying off down there, but we don't want them falling down. So the first thing we're going to do here is also turn off gravity in our scene settings. And I'll pull this over a little bit because I realize this is probably a little bit small on my screen for you all. So now, if we turn it off, you can see it's being ejected from the normals of the cube. That's not quite what we want yet. And this cube that we're setting up right now is not actually going to be our final cube. As you saw in my other one, the final cube had tons of fractures in it. But we're going to get to that. Next, what we're going to do here is, under the velocity, we're going to change the random to 0.1, or even 0.25 if you would like to. We're going to change the size under physics to 1, and the random size to 0.5, or even 0.75. For this demonstration, I'll go ahead and do 0.75. Now, I'm going to select group here, but I'm going to leave this open at the moment. So you can see here now this is happening, but we want it to start from this end and go to that end and not be emitted all throughout. Well, one other thing we have to do here is first change the volume, change to random, and you'll see once again here, it's still being emitted along the normals, and that's not quite what we want. So when you're in the particle system, you just simply select the textures panel, and you'll notice here that we're in the particle textures. Now we add a new blend texture here. We make sure this is an easing, and we can leave it alone because by default, it's already selected time. So now if you look here, it starts at this end over here and goes to this end. Now the reason why, and you'll probably notice this in the animation when you do it yourself, there are usually more fracture objects at the beginning and at the end of the simulation. And that's because the particles are only being emitted from the sides here, whereas when you get to either end of the animation, they're being emitted from a full face. So you're actually getting a lot more particles emitted. There are ways to solve this using different layouts, but I'm not really going to get into those at the moment because we don't really need to worry about them. So you can see here we have our basic animation set up now. So once going back into the particle system, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this just to save it in case. And we're going to move it to alternative 1 layer. So it's down here for us, but it's really out of the way. Now we're going to press spacebar and we're going to just type in cell. You see I already had it typed in there, but we're going to type in cell. And now cell fracture selected mesh objects will come up, assuming you did turn on the add-on for cell fractures. You can also find it down here in the bottom at any time. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And now you'll see we have this large menu, and this can be a little bit confusing to people at first. Well, I'm going to take it with you step by step and show you why and how things work. So what I'm going to do here, point source, is going to be own particles. In this case, I can select that because I do in fact have a particle system on my cube. Normally, this is selected by default, and I think this is kind of a downfall along the coder and probably needs to change it over to default being own verts because most of the objects I fracture do in fact not have particle systems. But it's just me personally. I don't know. Maybe other people are doing stuff. You can also put in different presets for yourself to make it a lot easier, and that's really important, especially when you're doing multiple fractures and you don't really like how a fracture looks, you go back and change it. The problem with that is this does not save the data you previously entered, so you will have to re-enter it every time and remember it, which can get a little confusing. So it's best just to save presets. But I'm not going to do that for this because I don't really need to. So I'm going to unselect own verts. I'm going to say only particles. I don't have any child particles, so I don't have to worry about that. And if we were to do noise 0, it would just fracture it into a bunch of smaller cubes. That's cool, but that's not quite the effect we want. So we're going to change this to 1, which is the highest amount of noise. You can see I'm trying to slide it up here, and I can't. So 1 noise is the highest amount. For my source limit, I'm going to do just 250. I don't need more. And then my recursive shatter. Now this is going to create smaller fractures off of larger fractures. And this is a really helpful thing, makes fractures look more realistic. So I'm going to go ahead and click random instead of small. And I'm just going to change the recursion to 2. Now the random is 0.25. I can leave everything as it is. We don't want to put smooth faces because that can mess up the normals with fractures and it looks weird and glitchy in the renders, so we're going to leave that as off. And we don't really need smooth fractures in this case either because most fractures in real life are not in fact smooth. They're usually jagged and broken hard edges. We're going to change the margin here to 0. Now if we were doing a physics simulation, I would want to keep this up to either 0.01 or farther, but in this case we're just exploding this cube, so our margin is 0. And the margin number is the space between 2 different fractures. So like I said, we want our cube to look as whole and as full as possible with no, cracks or shatters in it previous to it exploding. So it looks a bit more natural. Our mask mode, since we're not really worried about physics, we don't have to worry about any of these things because this also default sets up fracture SARDs, which is pretty cool for physics calculations. So that's awesome, but we don't really need to worry about this. So we have all this ready, and we're gonna keep this selected, which is next layer. So this will put all of our fracture objects on the next layer while keeping the object we're fracturing on the current layer, which is exactly what we want. So I'm gonna click show progress real time as well, so you can see it kind of off in the corner of my view here. But this may take a second, so I may cut this or I may not, depending on how long it takes. But here we go. And you can see here that the cube is getting quickly fractured. All right, it's done with the main fractures, and now you can see here it's going on to these smaller ones. So it's taking a smaller fracture and it's putting them over larger ones. It's kind of hard to see here, but once you do this on your own computer, you'll be able to see this as well. But yeah, I hope you guys are doing good. Awkward waiting for cell fractures to finish. Anyways, just waiting. I'll probably end up cutting most of this, but maybe not if I'm lazy. I have no idea yet. So you can see here, it's getting pretty close to finishing up, and there we go. We're done. All right, guys, so we're back here. I probably will not end up cutting that, just being lazy, but I might. You never know. So now here, if we go to the second layer, you can see here we have a ton of fractures. In fact, we have objects, 254 objects, which is just what we want. Now, it's important when you're over here to quickly run your mouse over and just click on a few things around the cube to make sure there is no larger cube. Because I've seen sometimes with fractures that the fracture add-on will leave a giant cube around this, the original mesh. And that can be a little annoying because then if you're making this a group to be emitted, it'll start emitting real whole cubes. And that's not what we want. But now we have all of these. So first what we're going to do is we're going to press A. So we unselected and then reselected everything here. We're going to press Shift D, and then we're going to right click. Now we're going to click M, and we're going to move it to layer 3. And you're going to see what we're going to do with that in a minute. But right now we're going to select one of these once again on this layer, layer 2. We're going to press A and A again so we have everything selected, and we're just going to press Control G. Now this is going to group, and I'm going to name it Explode Cube. So you can see I already have it typed in here. That's from when I was doing this experiment earlier, just to make sure everything worked. And you can call it whatever you want. I like to call mine Explode Cube because that's pretty much what it is. So now you can see it's all green. That means they're all in a group, which is exactly what we want to be emitted. And now on the third layer where our other ones are that aren't in a group, we're going to press A and then A again. And we're just going to select any one of these fracture shards. It doesn't really matter. So make sure that all of them are selected. And we're going to just press Control J. Now we're going to go up to Origin, and we're going to origin to geometry. Now, why am I doing this and why am I not just using a full cube? Well, in the terms of particle emission, the more vertices you have, even if you're emitting from volume, the better. So what I'm doing right now is just ensuring that our fracture and our explode modifier will look much better and realistic when we're doing this, because our explode modifier is also going to remove these faces and vertices. So we want it to remove as close to the original fracture as possible. So on layer 1, we're going to take this box. We're just going to delete it because we no longer need it anymore. But remember, in case we accidentally need it for something later, we still have it on our alternative 1 layer, and that's just safely backing it up. So we're going to move this object cube that's already fractured but fully joined on the third layer to the first layer like I just did there. And we're going to go over to particle systems. We're going to add a new one, and we're going to choose the settings of our original cube. So you can see here there's 2 because it's also on the alt layer. So if we press Alt A here, you can see that the particles are emitted starting here, going to here. So this is pretty much set up now, and all we have to do is 2 final things. And the first one here is under group, we're going to select exploding cube, and we're going to make sure we select pick random. This is not necessary, but it's pretty cool. And actually, what I'm seeing here is that there are a lot of the same ones popping up again and again in the group. So I might actually deselect pick random, and that seems to give us a much more fair result. So you can see here it's all coming off, and it's pretty much coming off how we expect it to. But I really don't think there's enough particles in this. Well, we can simply change that by going up here and pressing 750. And now you'll see here my frame rate's going to drop a little low because I'm recording and my computer's not the best, but it's all right. I love it. So you can see here that's a much more realistic shadow there. It works pretty well. What you can do also, if you'd like, is you can select this rotation thing. So you can see here if we render this, it's not really going to have much rotation, but if we just select random here and we press Alt A, you can quickly see that our rotations are a little bit more natural looking, and that's really what we want. So we're going to change phase, and we're just going to move these sliders around until we feel that we're pretty comfortable with this. We're going to make sure they're dynamic. although these are not really very important settings. So what we're also going to do is we're going to change the start up to 25 and the end to 75. So that way our animation doesn't start right away. So we still see our full cube and then bam, it starts exploding. And then on that frame, it finishes exploding and then everything's going to fade away. And there we go. Everything's done. All right. So our final step is to add the explode modifier. So we go over to the modifiers tab here, and then we'll press the explode modifier over here under the simulate modifier drop down. And then with this here, if we press Alt A, you'll notice that it's playing, but it also seems to be doing all these jagged things. And what we're going to do now is unselect alive. And I'm going to show you what the dead is before I do anything else. So we press Alt A here, and you'll see, there we go. Now we're seeing it. And we're starting to see all these jagged edges appear. And why is that? Well, this is the dead particles that have finished and disappeared themselves. The cube is actually ending up. So this looks pretty cool too, but it's not what we want. So if we simply uncheck dead, you'll now see that when we do this and we press Alt A, we're getting the effect we want. And that's about it. That's really all you have to do. Tweaking the particle systems is really the best way at this point that you would make this look more realistic, but it's something that you can do and it's really awesome. You can also move this around during the particle system effects, and it will quickly become apparent that this is, a sort of a live object that as it's going is slowly breaking apart. So you can do this in effect with, meteors breaking up in the atmosphere. And if you've ever seen Inception, that part where they're in the dream for the first time and Ariadne is realizing she's in the dream and everything starts to explode. I also have an example video of this on my channel and it's pretty cool looking. So this is just, a really cool effect that you can kind of add to the background of your movies and videos and animations that just looks really awesome. All right, well, I hope you all have enjoyed this and learned something from it, and I'll see you all next time.